to review the agenda for today? Okay, does anyone want to add anything to the agenda, public or on the board?
Nope.
All right, so let's move to the next one. Let's look to approve the minutes from the July 7th meeting. Everybody reviewed those?
I have, and I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Excellent.
And
Can I get a
would
second?
I would happily second
Perfect.
that.
Perfect.
Thank you,
Excellent.
Senator.
So the minutes are approved. So why don't we move on to the federal WIOA funding changes and impacts to Vermont?
Hey, am I the first person on that list, I think?
I think you are, Kendall. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Kendall Smith, Interim Commissioner at the Vermont Department of Labor. So I was trying to think, what to share until Thursday when we saw some more definitive congressional action where the good news was we had not seen any significant cuts to our funding yet. I will remind this group that the Vermont Department of Labor is primarily federal funded for our workforce activities through the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, otherwise known as WIOA. And we do have limited general fund dollars that are flexible. Limited general fund flexibility. Sorry, we have limited general fund dollars that are flexible that can go into offsetting activities or doing other kind of creative state priorities. There is a little bit, but not much. That WIOA funding within it is very specific about its uses and the types of eligible populations that it can support. So think things like dislocated worker, rapid response events, if businesses are doing layoffs, certain youth populations. And there's not, again, a lot of flexibility within those funds that can be used if the average Joe, one of us on this call, was to walk into our regional offices. Again, I'm kind of going down to illustrate potential impact. We have 11 regional offices, and those staff that work out of them primarily charge their time to these different WIOA line items, depending who walks in the door. So all of that being said, one of the things the administration was proposing at the beginning of the year was doing away with WIOA and introducing a Make America Skilled Again block grant structure. They were billing this block grant structure that it would be more flexible, where it wouldn't have all those line item codes that WIOA currently has, and you could move money around a little bit more depending on your state priorities. They were saying that about 10% would have to be dedicated to registered apprenticeship programs, but the kicker was that it could be up to 34% less overall than we currently get with WIOA, which again would be really impactful to the department. We would not be able to offset that money with existing general funds in our possession. That would end up having to be a conversation with the larger administration, with the legislature, if we were going to backfill any of that money with general fund. So Thursday of last week, the Senate committee that oversees labor's budget passed out a budget along bipartisan lines, and it rejected moving away from WIOA and moving into the, again, Make America Skilled Again block grant situation, as well as the 34% cut. So what they passed out primarily level funded all of our existing funding, which I will, in this environment, take as a win, take my marbles and go home. The total budget was 200 billion that they passed out, which is a 1 billion cut from the previous year, which $1 billion is a lot, but in the context of 200 billion, again, it could have been a lot worse. So we're still kind of looking at what that line by line impact would be to us. But knowing that everything's level funded, that's primarily good news. The bill also retains Job Corps. Folks will remember this spring that there was some question as to whether or not Job Corps would be continued federally. And it also continues a program called CCEP, SCEP. I might have that acronym slightly off, but that is a federal grant that an organization called Aid4TD in Vermont receives to work with older Vermonters that are seeking employment again. And that was in question about whether or not that would continue. So we're seeing kind of a status quo for now. However, the bill does still need to go to the House. So this is like good news for now, and that the Senate has maintained more or less the status quo for us, but It still has to go to the House. Kind of the pundits down there through our association are saying a CR is likely in September. So we're still more or less on standby as it relates to our federal funding in the workforce space. I will share that our labor market information, our LMI budget, which isn't necessarily direct workforce services, but is how we in Vermont look at how the economy is performing, how we do our unemployment figures, how when you all have questions about how many plumbers are there, or how many people in the trades, or how many nurses, they do have about a 2% cut, which comes out to be about $40,000. So we'll try to figure that out. It's impactful for them because they're a small division and a small budget. But again, it could have been much worse. So we'll be trying to understand for Rep. Marcotte, Senator Clarkson, as we're developing our budgets for the coming year, what that real impact is, if there's a way to offset it or not, or how we adjust with 40,000 less in that program. There's other news in other agencies and departments. I guess, Ruth, if you don't mind, there's one other item that's near and dear to my heart that I've been tracking, which is after school and summer funding. I'm also chair of our state interagency after school and summer council, and there is some question about 21C, which is the federal funding stream for after school and summer funding, and what was going to become of that or not. And my understanding is also on Thursday, and Ruth might talk about this more, when they moved an education funding bill out of that committee, they are level funding 21C funding as well, at least in this Senate proposal. Again, has to go through the House. So if they level fund 21C, again, I will take that as a win for us. We've been trying to see how we can use after school and summer settings to do career exploration for youth, which is why I bring that up. So I don't know if AOE was next on the agenda, but I can kind of punt it over to
May I-
you.
Yeah, go ahead.
May we, can we ask
Senator
Kendall
Clarkson.
questions?
Yes.
I hope so.
Okay. So when we heard the news that Trump had fired the head of Labor Bureau Statistics, I had an
Yes.
apoplexy and I immediately thought about Matt.
Yes.
And oh my God, I mean,
Mhm.
we are all dependent. I mean, unto little state committees, we are all dependent on the accuracy and integrity and trustworthiness of that office and that department. And I know she was the head and that all the other people hopefully are still there, but those cuts are
Mhm.
very concerning for any of us who make decisions based on that data.
Mhm.
So, I know our team in Washington, I mean, they're all now away, but I know they're fighting to support this, but that was really worrisome. And that
Mhm.
cut, even that small cut is going to be tough.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if there was, sorry, a question in there, Senator, but I agree with everything you just said. Checking in with Matt this morning, doing a little bit of a welfare check just to see, how he was doing after all the news this weekend. It doesn't immediately impact anything for us at the state level in terms of the way we're going to continue to do our jobs and crunch the data and the numbers.
Right.
But time will tell.
Yeah, but he punches all his numbers depending on those numbers.
Right. So it'll depend if they put in new leadership, and I believe I saw something this morning, but I didn't read the full article. If they've announced an interim or a replacement, if they make any changes to the methodology or the way the numbers are calculated or the data is collected. But this seemed more as a personnel change, but so far that one action doesn't impact programmatically how they are calculating the data. We shall see.
Yeah, exactly. Ah.
Kendall, does that, so understanding that $1 billion in funding was cut from the
Mhm.
200, what
Yep.
does that represent for Vermont? What, can you give a numerical
that's-
value to that?
I can't off the top of my head. We typically
Okay.
get the small state minimum for everything. So I don't know if I see some head nodding if folks are, okay, so I see people are familiar with the concept of small
Yep.
state minimum. So we will likely continue to receive the small state minimums. It'll be a question of if those are recalculated differently, but
Okay.
I do not have, and I can see if,
It's
I don't know if it
okay. I was just
exists, to be
curious if
honest
there was
with
like
you
a,
yet,
yeah.
I don't know if those tables exist yet on a state by
Okay.
state allocation basis. I haven't
Okay.
seen them if they do.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Kendall?
I'll
All
be here the
right.
whole time.
Be here all night. You'll be here all
I'll be
night.
here all the time.
How about Title III? Can we get an update, Ruth? Would you mind walking us through that, please?
I'm actually going to introduce to you my colleague, Robin Castle. Robin is
Oh,
the
excellent.
State Director of Adult Education and Literacy here at the agency, and she can much better give you an update than I can.
Excellent. Nice to meet you, Robin.
Hi, and I assume you mean Title II?
I'm sorry.
Did I have it
Yes.
down
Sorry?
wrong?
I have it as Title III on the agenda. Yeah, that's fine.
My
Title
bad.
II, yes, please. I think we had
Oh,
Kendall
okay.
doing 1 and 2 on the agenda.
No problem.
My fault.
No problem at all. So, yes, we did receive our grant award notice on Wednesday for adult education and literacy funding. That was a big relief because that was one of the pool of monies that had been withheld. And it is the amount that we expected, that we had been told we'd be getting in May. So it's around $900,000 total in federal funds. We also have another $6.5 million in state funds. So we were moving forward with everything and keeping our doors open with state funding and keeping fingers crossed. So this is a big relief. Federal funding represents about 10% of the funding we have. So that's the biggest news, and in lines with what Kendall was saying, we saw that the Title II funds had been put back in the budget by the Senate. The Title II funds had been eliminated by the Trump administration in their version of the budget. So we're waiting also to see what happens in the House. Other than that, let me just look at there, as you know, there are several lawsuits that the state has joined. One of them being regarding the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act notice of interpretation that we received that was suggesting that all entities receiving federal funds had to verify citizenship of students. So Vermont has joined that lawsuit to argue that. It's obviously, I can speak for AEL, it's not data that we collect. We have been serving all students who come to us if they meet all of the stated eligibility requirements in statute. And we don't ask them to prove that they are a citizen. So are there any questions? There is a recommendation to transfer both CTE and AEL to Department of Labor. And there's been some movement for that, and that's happening at the federal level. That wouldn't necessarily impact what happens at the state level. But we don't know where that's going to go either. We understand they're actively working together at this time. And we do know that our AEL staff at the U.S. Department of Education is greatly reduced. I think that happened to CTE as well, but I'll let Ruth speak to that. So are there any questions or anything else you wanted me to address?
No, looks good. Thank you, Robin.
Oh,
You're very
wait.
welcome.
Robin,
Oh,
I have a quick
no.
question for you. Allison
Sure.
Clarkson, hi, nice to meet
Hi.
you. The the graduation, which is in a week or two, that's in Springfield for adult education, is that for the entire state or just for the Windsor County people?
I'm assuming that's local. I hadn't heard about that. I'm assuming that's a local graduation ceremony.
Okay, for for roughly our Windsor County or something. I don't know what it's done by.
Yeah, I don't know. Is that something
Okay.
Vermont Adult Learning is
Right.
hosting or?
They must be. And I just would, before Ruth gives you the update on CTE, Ruth, would you also, on behalf of Mike and me, maybe update everybody on our meeting that we had in Middlebury last week or the week before, whenever the. Right.
Let me start with the federal update. And so Robin's, there's several things here. So we also received news at the end of last week that the Senate's proposed budget would keep level funding for Perkins, and that would be helpful. It would also ensure that certain money that was cut. So there's money for Perkins that gets allocated to states, there's money for Perkins innovation grants, and there's money for Perkins related national research. And the national research informs a variety of data and other things that inform reauthorization of a particular piece of legislation. And the Trump administration had, although the funds had been appropriated, had cut that money for CTE national research. And the Senate budget seeks to reinstate that money and also seeks to reinstate language that would say that the U.S. Department of Education must maintain adequate staffing to fully implement Perkins as written. So we don't know again. So that's a huge win. It passed with strong bipartisan support. What happens next as the House considers their agenda, we will wait and see. So that's the first piece. The second piece is that, as Robin said, there's an interagency agreement that would shift significant responsibility for Perkins and adult education and literacy from the U.S. Department of Education to the U.S. Department of Labor. I would be happy to send to each of you the email I have from Advanced CTE, which explains that and also gives you a link if you want to contact members of Congress to weigh in on your feelings about that. It gives you a way to easily do that. It explains the context so you can, and it's literally a click on a button, and if you want to send a message, it's there for you. So I will share that out with all of you. And then the third piece, I think, at the federal level is that the Trump administration's agenda clearly articulates, or at least it did as of 10 days ago. So I want to clarify that I haven't seen anything new in the last 10 days, but clearly articulates that they would like to eliminate post-secondary institutions' eligibility to receive Perkins funding. So currently, Vermont receives $5.9 million in Perkins funding. And of that, 15% stays at the Agency of Education as required by law, and that does things like pay my salary, pay some other people's salaries, and provide state leadership to implement the requirements of the act as they apply to states. And then 85% of our 5.9 million must be directly granted to eligible recipients. And in Vermont, those are our 17 CTE centers and the Community College of Vermont. And of that 85%, CCV gets, it's not exactly 25%, but I think it's a 22% piece. They get just over $1 million a year. So that's significant. And it would be a significant impact if the Trump administration were to prevail on its efforts to eliminate post-secondary institutions' eligibility for Perkins funding, because it would impact our whole national community college system, technical college system. It would have tremendous impact. I will say that the national conversation in the CTE realm is that this is part of the administration's overall attack on post-secondary education, a system they have found and deemed to be, I guess broken might be the term, but not based on the data that we might have to consider in our look at how things are working and what those things are required. It also seems to be directly in conflict with the requirements of Perkins, for example, that require strong secondary to post-secondary CTE pathways. So if you eliminate funding for post-secondary CTE, you cut off those post-secondary pathways. There's some argument that with Workforce Pell, which was also passed, that would mean that Workforce Pell funding could just replace Perkins. I don't think that's a realistic starting point, but that's been one of the arguments made. There are huge implications for Workforce Pell that the State Workforce Development Board will ultimately need to weigh in on, because there's all kinds of things that are tied to the WIOA state plan and to Perkins that would require the State Workforce Development Board to do significant things to determine what programs in Vermont, what post-secondary programs would even be eligible for Workforce Pell based on a variety of data sources. I sent Sabina the resource I have so far about that, and so I will keep you informed, but there's a nice detailed fact sheet so far, and that's going to require State Workforce Development Board attention moving forward. So I will send you, what I will do is I will send you the advanced CTE legislative update that gives you a whole bunch of this information so that you've got it. You've got the ability then to look at weighing in on that shift of Perkins funding to Department of Labor, and message your members of Congress about that. It also will have information about the priority the administration is placing on removing post-secondary eligibility for Perkins. And I'll make sure you have the resource I sent to Sabina. I'll send it all out to everybody, and then you can decide how to respond. I will say that the national conversation about the move of Perkins requirements to labor has several things that are in direct conflict with law as written, which causes concern. And then in addition, there's a significant concern at the federal level and the national CTE community across the country, regardless of I'd say it's strong bipartisan concern of those in my role at different state agencies that it would greatly shift what we do with Perkins and how we do it if this were to be fully moved to labor. We have an outstanding team at Octave who supports our CTE work and Perkins. They went from a team of, I think, 8, they're down to 3, but they have the expertise. They respond immediately to our requests for assistance. They provide our guidance. They make sure we're using the funds in ways that are allowable, and they're wonderful. Their expertise is something we rely on greatly. There's no clear knowledge yet about what it would mean with this interagency agreement. We have heard just at the end of last week that the interagency agreement is moving fully forward, but for now we can continue to rely on our resources at the U.S. Department of Education, but whether that will continue is not yet clear. So a lot of uncertainty. There's a definite feeling at the national level that much of what the Trump administration's agenda is designed to return CTE to vocational education. But I would say my national colleagues who have been most directly involved say that that may be more of a fact of those in the administration honestly not understanding career technical education and not seeking to undermine career technical education. It may be it may be uninformed about current CTE and be rooted in some of the things we still work with in Vermont, right? Where people don't yet have an understanding of what our modern CTE system looks like and are making decisions in light of that. Okay, before we move on to the other things, Senator Clarkson, please ask your questions about this and anyone else too.
I'd love to ask you a question about this, because I'd love to ask, given all the work we've done trying to further legitimize CTE in our high school curriculum and as a major area of study that has its own integrity, I would hope that our agency of administration and education would strongly be opposing the move of CTE to labor. Is that in fact correct?
We have expressed our concern, but ultimately, so far what state agencies have to say has not weighed in, right? So I would say that the national CTE community, other state agencies, the Agency of Education have all expressed why this is not good for us and why this is contrary to law. There's not a direct lawsuit at this point in time like there has been for some other things. I think there's been a lot of work at the national level to really have our national CTE organizations meeting with key committee members to say, this is why this is not what was intended. There's a lot happening on the Hill with this that I think we're still waiting to see how it plays out, but it's certainly an area of concern.
Huge
concern.
Yeah.
Chris, you have a question?
Yeah, as a follow-up to that, what has been the general sense across, and I hate to use blue and red states, but with the the red states in terms of being in line with what you're saying and their concern? Has there been a concern from those other states? Okay, good.
But what I would say, Chris, it's fascinating to me to look too, because that's where I would say all of the states that I like, we're all present at regular monthly meetings, and all states share the concern. Or if there are states that aren't concerned, they're not saying so in a public forum. Whereas Robin mentioned the piece about, and I'm not going to get this right, Robin, but all the different words, that's letters that come out to Prora, which basically means the requirement to determine students' citizenship to be, or legal status to be able to be eligible to receive certain services. That has more of a split at the national level, but this move of Perkins from education to labor doesn't have any split that I have seen.
Ruth, well, the Perkins funding, the 5.9 million that might be cut, how much does that represent the funding that goes to community colleges and technical schools?
Wondering about that myself, I don't know. So in Vermont, as I said, it would be about 1.1 or 1.2 million that would affect CCV. I don't know how that factors into overall things, but I can tell you they use Perkins money to fund some or all salaries of several key employees at CCV, so that certainly would be an impact. They also use it to keep labs up to date, to provide required software licenses, other kinds of things. So it would certainly have an impact. I don't know how Vermont compares to other states in the percentage of Perkins fundings that supports community college initiatives versus other funding, but I think it's something that I hope there's a national coalition of community colleges that is really crafting a more unified national response, because I think it's going to take that level of response.
But Tiffany's in the meeting, at least I see TW. So I would assume Tiffany might be able to have that answer or get at that answer at some point.
Yeah, I think Ruth's done a great job in outlining how that money is used and what that impact is. As far as what AACC and other community college organizations are doing, I mean, they have been doing a lot of informing of this to the states of what's going on with Perkins. And of course, we've been watching Perkins really closely amongst all of the other thousands of balls in the air when it comes to higher ed and the effects that are that are either coming our way or might come our way when it comes to serving certain populations of people and other pieces of work. I can certainly bring back to the committee some of the responses from groups like AACC, if that is helpful, and add that to what Ruth will be sending to the group.
And Tiffany, the other thing I know is that I know CCV has been in touch with Senator Sanders' office, and they reached out to me today, and I sent them the information I have to help them fully understand what has been shared nationally in the CTE community. That's
great. And Ruth, thank you so much for not only your ability to outline a complex and frustrating issue so well, but also the impacts. It's not just that it doesn't just make on CCV, but on the impacts on pathways and all of the interconnected pieces that we have throughout the state. I think it's a pretty significant potential impact.
I agree, Tiffany, and I'm really concerned that it fails to understand what jobs of the 21st century require, and that the scaffold, that things that CTE education doesn't end at high school, and that we do our best to provide strong foundational skills for students to enter the workforce, apprenticeship, and go on to post-secondary education, knowing that where they land in the first 6 months after graduation is not where they will stay. And on a personal note, I yesterday happened to run into a Central Vermont Career Center graduate who I worked with 8 years ago. And he was in a program and went straight into employment and has had a good job in the local area. But I saw him yesterday and I asked him how he was doing. And he said, "Remember, Ms. Durkee, when you asked me to take CCV's Introduction to College and Careers and I told you I didn't need it and you told me to give it a shot anyway?" He's like, "Well, it was doing that gave me the confidence to go back to school this year, because while I'm doing what I'm doing now, I don't want to do this forever and I need to continue my training." So
That's
Tiffany.
great.
That's so great. Thank you so much,
It's one
Ruth.
of those moments where he must have known I needed that this weekend. It was like I needed that grounding, right?
There is so much of it too. When you walk around Vermont and don't even know the impacts that CT and CCV have made in every community, and I popped into a store in Middlebury and the woman said, I went to CCV and now I run this store. It's a beautiful store in the corner, right in the main drag of Middlebury. And she said, all of my friends went to these big business schools and have huge loans and I don't. So I was able to not only start my business, but I'm able to own a home and all of the pieces I couldn't do if I was paying back student loans. And so I think that as we're looking around the landscape, I mean, the ripple effects are huge for something like this.
Do you have other questions about the national landscape? And I will write it as soon as I can this afternoon, send out the federal policy information I have for you.
Ruth, does this affect well, what was once VTC, but is part of, I guess, is just State College Vermont Randolph? But does it affect the technical aspect of that?
Two things that go with that. When Vermont State University, when all the colleges moved to become Vermont State University, they were no longer directly eligible to receive Perkins funds.
Oh, that's too bad.
Because they could not, so we had several meetings with the U.S. Department of Education at the time about this. And because they were not, Perkins funds are very limited to 2-year associate's degree programs in certain occupational sectors. And the way VTSU was structured made that much more complicated. So what we've done instead is that we still use some Perkins funds to contract directly with VTSU to provide dual enrollment courses that are offered in CTE centers that are aligned to CTE pathways. So they still get about $50,000 a year, it may be a little less than that in Perkins funding, to really do that secondary to post-secondary pathway piece. They just don't get the other funds that they were receiving. And they received, the post-secondary allocation was split between CCV and VTC when it was VTC, and CCV received far more funds. They received they usually received about 3/4 of the post-secondary funds that were available because it's based on a federal formula that looks at number of full-time equivalent students who are eligible for Pell. So it looks at number of economically disadvantaged students served, and CCV has a strong population. And VTC, when they existed, had a very low Pell Grant student population, and so they were only receiving a couple $100,000 a year, and now they're not getting some of those funds, but they are getting about $50,000 a year.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions for Ruth?
Would you like me, Senator Clarkson, to try to summarize our July 24th, I believe it was, meeting? And you're going to chip in and help me, you and Representative Marcotte, right?
Mike and I are not shy.
I appreciate that about both of you. Senator Ram Hinsdale convened the meeting that was held on July 24th at the Patricia Hannaford Career Center in Middlebury. And I think it was really focused on what comes next for CTE in the upcoming legislative session. And that includes what we do with earlier access to career technical education, career exploration, strengthening our existing CTE system, and really thinking about what comes next based on APA's recommendations and where we are, and thinking about what a bill might include to really look at CTE funding and governance holistically. And it was a diverse range of people who were at the meeting. Sabina was there. Jay Ramsey from the Department of Labor was there. I'm looking to see who else. But there were legislators, there were workforce representatives, there were design and technology teachers at the middle and high school level, there were CT center directors.
And one business representative.
That's right. And I think it was a really productive conversation.
It was great.
And I think the key takeaway from my standpoint, and then I will defer to you to say what you left with. But my piece was I came back and I had an excellent conversation with Secretary Saunders early the next week. We are looking forward to working with Senator Hardy graciously volunteered to help draft language for a bill. And we had some various pieces of draft language that certainly different people had worked on over the past legislative session, and we are pulling them all together in one place and we look forward to finding a way to collaborate on what language comes next, understanding that it's a starting point. And then when we have something, we can all look at it, respond, and go from there. I would say my one other takeaway from the meeting was something that I don't think this group will be surprised to hear, but I think was a surprise to some of the CTE Center folks who were in the room. And that's just how quickly this will move, right? So I think there's a goal to have some draft legislation by November for strong consideration at the beginning of the legislative session. And I think we had CTE Center folks who somehow thought that this could be pushed off a year or two. And I think it was a grounding moment for them to go back to their colleagues and say, some of you have really been pushing for this not to move too quickly, but it's going to move pretty quickly. And the timing's important for that. And we need to define what comes next for career technical education. We've been talking about it we've been talking about it a long time. And we have clear recommendations to move forward with. I think the other piece that the agency fully acknowledges is that there probably won't be consensus among the CTE Center directors. I think they've been clear about that. They don't all agree. And so how we help them focus on what we design a new system to be sure to include and what we design to make sure what current challenges in our system we do not design to continue will be important.
Right, but the key thing is VACTED, the CTE Center Association has done excellent white papers on these issues. Some people have gone rogue, and but on the whole, I would say the majority of the CTE directors support the white papers that have been produced thus far, and we're going to review them at our next meeting. They have a new chair of that group, Eric
from Green Mountain Technology and Career Center in Hyde Park.
In Hyde Park, that's where we're meeting next.
Yes.
And for me, it's very important for us to blend the APA recommendations, the VACTED's on the ground where the rubber hits the road recommendations, and and work it all together. Timing with the redistricting task force is critically important. That CTE be right in that equation and discussion and design.
Absolutely, and I think as decisions are made about CTE governance, that's where I'd say VACTED still needs to do more work internally to determine where they fall, because I understand it's complicated, right? And it's hard to really know what the right best option is, but I think they're continuing to articulate that. I don't know if they'll reach consensus on that or not. They hadn't as of April, but we didn't have an Act 73 in April, and I think it's time for them to revisit that in light of Act 73. And I'm hopeful that in the next month or two, that's where they will continue to focus their energy under Eric's extremely able leadership in facilitating those conversations.
Yeah, I think the question's been called on it. So I think.
Right. And I think we still have a few who are hopeful the question hadn't been called, and and I understand that too. It's hard to think systemically about change when things are working well for you, but also things are working well up to a point. But the APA studies pointed out that even where things are working well, our system has significant opportunities to be better. So this is our time to design for that.
Mike, you want to add anything?
But, I think, there's going to be a next step after that is how we deal with adult CTE as well.
Yes.
And that's something not to lose sight of. But I think we need to get the system set wherever we land before we start taking on the adult side of CTE. The governance structure for that and where does that sit is going to be important as well. So there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of things we need to think about that we really don't see, or most people don't see, especially when we're talking about CTE in the high school level, is all the things in the backside of it. How do we make sure that we're providing enough money per student and still be able to pay for, janitorial services, lease agreements, electric. I mean, all of that stuff needs to be thought of as well. So, we're trying to understand what are the pros and cons to, having one single district for CTE opposed to possibly following the districts. So it's hard for us to really make a decision until we understand what the pros and cons are. And understanding the pros and cons of the 3 different structures that are out there on how CTEs operate right now.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would also say there's so much in the Act 73 that doesn't specifically name CTE, but has CTE implications. And so the agency has been thinking about that in our work and trying to think about how we partner with VACTED as we explore that more fully as well.
I think it's such an irony that one of the options for the redistricting is to redistrict them all around the CTE centers. I mean, having been undervalued for so long, it is amusing that they're now at the center of the conversation about districting. Just have to say that.
I think that's myself some days, Senator Clarkson.
All right. Any other questions for Ruth? We all set? All right, why don't we move next to AHS? I have Kristen McClure up on the agenda, but I don't see Kristen here. Is there someone that can? Go ahead, Sabina.
Suzanne, are you jumping in for Kristen on this?
I had not planned on it.
Okay.
I was attending for the first time. What was her update supposed to be on? Sorry, I don't have the agenda right in front of me.
Federal implications of all the stuff that's been going on. Is that something you want to weigh in on, Kendall, or we'll just come back to it next month?
Well, like many of us here, we've all probably read the headlines around changes with work requirements to Medicaid, SNAP, and TANF, but I don't feel like it's appropriate for me to comment for AHS, given their internal work that they're doing to measure impact. So we should wait for, I think, Deputy Secretary McClure or somebody who's prepared to give that overview.
I concur. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Well, next on the agenda is discussion on revised goals. Sabina, I'm going to push this to you. But real quick, just to start, I had actually sent out an email through Sabina a couple of weeks ago after our last meeting. I didn't get a response. So hopeful that we can get a good conversation going here in this meeting. So Sabina, do you want to go?
Sure. After the last meeting, I had some conversations with Ruth and with Secretary Curley about the 2 goals that seem to be ones that were most in need of, well, most in need, but we talk mostly about with revisions. And I can share my screen so that they're there in front of us. And I think you can see that, right? So we had the first one was about the CTE potential career track programs that we would work with to identify some new opportunities, and working with Ruth. And I'm gonna let you take the lead on that with the suggested revisions. Is that all right?
Oh gosh, I hadn't thought about that since I sent them to you, Sabina.
Okay. Well, we felt like it was that it needed a little articulation, but basically that it would be a board subcommittee that would work with partners and identify 1 to 3 new programs or pathways, and not to make it necessarily for the 27 years academic year, but just taking into consideration some of the tactics or implementation processes that who would be on the committee, would these potential new career tracks be adult first and start there and then work through to the secondary high school level CTEs, or could it be both at the same time? Ruth suggested we should do a gap analysis, and we need to think about funding and resource needs. And there'll be other system considerations that will come up as determined by the committee. Is that a fair way of me putting it, Ruth?
I think so, Sabina, and I think the key thing was like, I think the thing that isn't maybe fully captured here is also that piece of adult CTE, post-secondary CTE programs, and where the state college system comes into play, where secondary CTE, thinking back to those, how do we create the strongest pathways for our students? Not sure what the answers are, but what's the right development process to identify what role each partner in the system plays?
And I think we'll stop there. I'll stop sharing so I can see everybody. But then we could talk about that and see if anybody has any feedback. And then we'll move on to the next one after that. Okay.
Well, I think those are great changes. And I do think the post-secondary part, obviously what Ruth just said about post-secondary, but I think that really does answer a lot of what we talked about and the issues that we're facing with that goal. So I appreciate the time everybody put in.
A metal one, they said you can't use that one.
I don't know where this,
Background is coming from, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that feels comfortable and we can keep working forward on it, and, continue to develop it moving forward and then bring it to the board at some point.
For sure.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
not
Sounds great.
forget about making sure that we have someone from the CTEs on board with this too. I think
Yes.
that there's gonna have to be a conversation of how we go about this before. And, what's the time frame it takes to stand up a training? Also, is it possible that some of these trainings could be online trainings so that workers from around the state or students from around the state could access the trainings from one CTE center? So there's, I think, a lot of things that we can think about and try to work on to get some positive place for this to go.
Suggestions?
I agree. Real quick, had there been any informal discussion with anyone from the CTEs in terms of when this was drafted? Just as, offhand conversations, or no?
No, I haven't. It hasn't gotten that far yet. Yeah.
Just wondering.
Yeah. Definitely be next step to have those conversations, to your point, Chris.
As a business rep, I like it. I think it's great.
I would just add that since Sabina and I talked about this a couple weeks ago, we've had more information about Workforce Pell, and that has implications that we'll probably need to consider. So I will make sure you have all of that as well. But there's so many moving pieces, and some of this goes to what it takes to design and implement at each different level, and what the timing of that looks like, and how to be most strategic, and then how to best access whatever resources are available. And that can include Perkins, it can include Workforce Pell, it can include other resources. But I think until we sort of know more, but trying to think about how we frame this, all of the federal money that comes to CTE requires that gap analysis. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to make sure it was included, so that if something is developed, that it would not be precluded from eligibility for the federal funds we oversee.
Yeah, we might have to reassess in the fall.
We may have to reassess regularly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah.
Every 10 days.
Every day. Every day.
Exactly.
Oh, Jiminy. Okay. Okay. Did anybody else have any comments or questions? Okay, then I'll share again. I thought we were going to be talking about this longer. Sorry. And then the second one that we had a lot of comments and discussion on was the one, number 2 here, about whether or not there would be a subcommittee of the board comprised of board members, state agency leaders, large employers, regional development corps, that could work to identify some businesses that want to expand and I was going to say target, but that doesn't come out right. But identify non-Vermont businesses that might want to relocate here. And much of that conversation last month, as you may remember, isn't ACCD doing that? And how would you be actually able to help? And that's their focus and vision. And so I've had a couple of conversations and email exchanges with Secretary Curley and Commissioner Long, and I thought I would just toss it to you all and see if you had any initial reactions or anything right now.
What did they suggest, Sabina? Because and I also have been thinking about this. I also think Jessica Hartleben, who runs the Vermont Economic Progress Council, because of the VEGGIE program, which is designed to increase skills and workforce and output, and in part for companies, maybe we could chat with Brett. Maybe you and I could chat with Brett and Jessica together and sort of look at this and see what makes sense for us to have as a priority, as opposed to what they have as priorities, and come back with a suggested revision for this for our next meeting. What do you think about that? Maybe Mike could join us.
Sure. Secretary Curley on?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Whoever you want. Lindsay would be great.
We're both on. I'll let Brett speak. Go ahead.
Yeah, Commissioner Long, Department of Economic Development.
Oh,
and
you're just hidden. You've been there the whole time.
Yeah, we've been. It's funny. I think it must be a little bit dark in the room, but we're together.
Yep.
You mean that's Lindsay and Brett together?
Hi.
What a team! Wow. Okay. Then I don't need to say anything. You guys can do all the talk.
Well, I was going to say that the workforce conversation, I think, fits in very nicely with a whole ecosystem conversation that we've been having in the Department of Economic Development. Because when we're talking to businesses, workforce is certainly one of the principal issues that comes up. And I think in a prior conversation with the chair, we raised a bunch of issues that are all interrelated. I think, the way it's described here in the proposed goals is to try to ensure that more graduates stay in Vermont. But there's really a whole bunch of concerns that we hear from businesses, but also, frankly, from legislators about things like making sure that there's a job for a trailing spouse, or there's a career path for people that potentially are working for a small business. So how do they develop a career path? And I think it all fits together into an ecosystem conversation. And certainly one of the pieces there is workforce development. And one of the things that we have been looking at is how do we spend more time looking at sectors? My past experience, there's a lot of support that's generated by a sector. And given the small nature of our economy in Vermont, sometimes I think there's the opportunity to look across businesses to create a sector. The example that I often use are businesses that are in internet retailing. So, Gardner Supply and Orvis might not be, immediately considered to be in the same sector, but from a workforce standpoint, they have people who are doing fundamentally the same jobs. They're trying to sell things on the internet, they're trying to merchandise, all that kind of stuff. And so that's one of the issues that we hear from when we're talking about businesses trying to expand in Vermont or move to Vermont, is how do we develop the ecosystem to address a bunch of these questions? Certainly we have the other workforce area of making sure that people have sufficient skills to be able to undertake jobs, principally manufacturing. That's where we hear about it probably the most. But I think if we look at it at the ecosystem level, we can incorporate a whole bunch of concerns that we hear about from people. And, what can we all do with workforce as being a prime issue to support that ecosystem?
So I think what I'm hearing, if I might try to summarize this, is Brett is not specifically tackling, goal number 2 or any other specific goal. He's sort of saying, if we were to imagine a completely different goal, it would be related to the broader ecosystem
Right.
of building the workforce. And I don't know that we have the language for that, but that would be that conversation sort of behind the scenes of what would that look like? What would that goal look like?
Right. I mean, to Senator Clarkson's comment, we have folks here who are spending a good part of their day working to help businesses expand and trying to recruit businesses to locate in Vermont. And the real goal would be to make it easier to do those jobs, make it easier for people to decide they want to expand here, and make it easier for businesses to see the benefits of locating here.
So if we were to specifically build, if we wanted to sort of keep the bones of that goal and build it into what Brett talked about, because the way it's written right now, as we all agree, it risks being duplicative rather than additive.
Right.
We could essentially try to leverage the workforce board's strengths by rewriting it in a way that makes the workforce preparedness the central contribution, as opposed to saying that the board is going to identify the businesses or target, right, those businesses to relocate. Like, shift the focus onto that, the workforce preparedness, focusing on the training, the alignment, the pipeline building, that coordination, I guess, aspect.
Right. I think, Lindsay, that's key. So I think if you do the work of recruiting, that's really not our
Yes.
job. Our job is
Right.
to hear from you about a company that is wanting to come and that they have a very specific workforce need. How can we tailor some of our training to their needs? What's the time frame on that? Or is there something we're already doing in that workforce development that they don't necessarily know about that could work for them and satisfy them? But I think if we work, maybe coordinate, I think the key work always,
Yeah.
Kendall
Yeah.
knows this is my favorite
agree.
word, coordinate. Coordinate your efforts with our efforts and Veggie's efforts. That would be,
Yeah.
and the
Right.
Vermont
Powerful.
training program.
And
Yeah.
can I throw something in there? The thing I do like about the goal is to create the subcommittee that is tied to the state leaders so that there is a structure in place that forces us to get together to say, these are the businesses that are talking about coming, or that
Right.
we're, talking to, that are trying to expand, so that, to your point, we're not forgetting to have those conversations and share them with each other. So I like that. The other thing I would say is, what I worry about is, so we can always react to the information we have, but I would also challenge us to think about how we could be more proactive in building those pipelines. That is the really tricky part, right? Is what is the workforce maybe we really want to have that is going to attract those businesses or help the ones that are here expand, that we're not doing correctly yet. Or I don't want to say not doing correctly, but if we were more proactively building something, what would it be? What do we want to be?
Secretary Curley, I think that's a great point. I think,
Yep.
Brett, when we spoke before, we talked about the timing of when what's called an opportunity for a company to move into the state comes up. What is the timing of that opportunity and then the fulfillment of them moving here, right? It's not often
Right.
very long and doesn't give
Right.
us the ability to make adjustments and move forward. So, right now, my company is looking at expanding into another state only because there's no infrastructure here for us to do. But we're looking at all these programs that are already in place. A lot of those things are happening. So I think exactly what you just said, Secretary Curley, is ideal. Like, what are we driving towards? What's the businesses that we want to bring here? What are the opportunities we want to drive in the state are really, really important as we take the next steps. Otherwise, we're
agree.
just kind of floundering and trying to be responsive.
Yeah, one, we're coordinated. Two, we're data driven, and three, we have a sense of purpose and strategy. I like it.
So how do we word that appropriately?
Yeah.
Are we wording this to say, are we wording this to say that, you know, driving towards a particular, the goal is to find, you know, markets or applications that work best for what we want to drive towards? Like how do we want to word that?
Why don't we wordsmith it offline and come back with a revision? Maybe Brett and Lindsay and I can work on a language, and Sabina will come back with a suggested revision rather than wordsmithing it here.
Yeah.
I agree.
And again, I think the key is to support ACCD's business growth and recruitment, establishing the SWDB's committee, because we want to make sure that happens, but to keep thinking about the work to be in coordination. So you're right, we can wordsmith offline, but we want to make sure we're additive, not duplicative.
Exactly. And actually it goes to goal number 1, which we've just discussed, the CTE one, which is identifying new areas that we need to be developing for workforce training. So, I mean, it all kind of feeds together.
Yeah, it's great to hear you all talking about CTEs, because that's one of the things that comes up in our conversations all the time. There's a great opportunity there to enhance that relationship with business.
Yeah, and I'll just add, just some, not to get into the wordsmithing piece, but in this one, I think it would be imperative just to make sure it's like involving industry, and I don't want to say industry driven or business driven, but a real focus on the fact that we're listening to that stakeholder group as we're developing this.
Yes. And, you know, like Jay, listening to you to say, you know, we're looking in other states because the infrastructure is not here, right? So there, we can stay in a real silo here and say, there's the workforce infrastructure, and then there's the other infrastructure. And so those are other pieces that we need to not forget about. So I also would, again, say, challenge us to figure out how to make sure that when we're hearing those other things that don't necessarily fall within the workforce board's purview, that we don't just let them fall aside and say, well, they're not our problem, right? To make sure that we are noting them and raising them to whoever might have levers to pull to say, this is why we have companies here that are expanding elsewhere or that are leaving us. So that we're not forgetting about that too, because that is happening.
Yeah.
So
and for clarity, we're not leaving. I don't want to make sure that's not.
No,
like...
I hear you, but what I heard was you have to, you know, you're expanding elsewhere because there is something you need that is somewhere else.
He has a need for infrastructure, he said, that we somehow are not able to support.
We don't have lithium, right? And we don't have steel, and we don't
Aren't
have
there a lot of people
oil
in the state taking lithium?
I don't believe that there's any other lithium battery manufacturers in the state.
No, I was just
joking.
Because a lot of people are taking lithium.
Oh, yeah.
But what I wanted to say is, you know, we have an example of ACCD worked very hard, and it may still be a goal to attract more aviation businesses. I remember this as one of your goals a while ago. Maybe it's not current. So we have a good example of this coordination is, okay, so that's your goal. We know you're wanting to attract more high-level aviation industries to Vermont. So we have a modest aviation program in our CTE centers. We could be working to expand that and have more of that in Springfield, more of it up in Burlington and when, you know, Essex, wherever the hell it is. And that's the kind of coordination we need to be working on. You telling us what areas of business you're actively focused on wanting to recruit and are helping try and ensure that workforce, those workforce skills are being developed.
And I would also say, like, it goes both ways, right? The folks on this call are also out there understanding what is growing to come back to us to say so to your point, Senator, we know that we need a lot of pilots in the next number of years. Plus we have this growing aviation industry. We're in the middle of this corridor between Montreal and Connecticut. So I would agree with you. Yes. We need more of these aviation programs. We should have signature programs all over the state because we know that we will employ them and we will need them. But what are the other industries? You know, we should know this, but again, Jay, as you're growing, like what could we be doing in the lithium space? Like, you know, we know again that with the semiconductors, we know that's growing, right? There are certain things we know about because there's like a lot of coverage of it. But we would also look to this group as well to be sort of sounding the alarm saying, did you know that there's sort of this natural organic growth of XYZ happening in Vermont? And we could be that expert, kind of like the captive insurance. For those of you that don't know, we are the captive insurance like capital of the world. You know, so like what are we poised to be? So anyway, I love it. I think this is a really good adjustment to that goal.
I think this is a great example of how we can't just say, oh, that's economic development's job. This is a great example. I think we have to work hand in hand, like very, very closely to step forward and really make progress. I think it's really important, for sure.
I guess the other thing I should chime in with is, for those of you that don't know, Vermont is actually the fiscal agent for a grant from the Department of Defense, in which we are doing a collaboration with all 6 New England states to support defense manufacturing. And when we talk with people in those businesses across New England, there's one really consistent message that comes out of that, which is we need to be able to reach young people earlier about career opportunities. And unfortunately, in our grant, we're not able to address it because the grant doesn't let us work with anybody less than a college level situation. So, you know, we've done a bunch of research on it, and everything I've read indicates that, you know, it's an important way to proceed. But in our group, we don't have the ability to do anything along those lines. There are obviously little pockets of examples, like what was happening in Randolph several years ago. But it seems like a great opportunity. And so, you know, it seems like a place where the Workforce Development Board could make some headway.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, I love that. I don't think a lot of people realize.
It's pretty hard, Brett. I mean, as you know, Mike and I, we have been the legislature's been pushing hard to start this all in 7th and 8th grade so that we can actively be including 9th and 10th graders much more actively in CTE so that we A, affect the dropout rate, and B, get more people jazzed earlier so that they can take advantage of all these things earlier and graduate with more.
Absolutely.
I think, Brett, also the DoD piece of that is really interesting. I don't think people realize what a big deal Norwich University is right now in the world, and especially the Center for Counter Cyber Terrorism is actually the U.S. Center is located in Norwich. So there's a lot going on that I love that idea, Brett. It's a really good point.
And I think we have some CTE, don't we, Ruth, in cyber terrorism? We have some stuff. Don't we have some CTE in that area?
You are correct. We have one cybersecurity program specifically at Riverbend, and we have other programs that incorporate cybersecurity. And we have as of last year, we have a very nice partnership with Champlain College that's providing dual enrollment courses. And one of their courses is not only for our IT and cybersecurity students, but also for our criminal justice students to look at the implications for criminal justice pathways in terms of cybersecurity and cyber crimes. Cool stuff.
We need to meet more often.
Well, I was in DC a few months ago meeting with the ACP Council with Secretary Granholm, and Norwich was like 45 minutes of the conversation. And people in our state don't even realize how big of it. I mean, Norwich funds the Citadel. Literally, the funding goes to Norwich, and Norwich shares it with the Citadel. So it's a really big deal, and it's right here in our backyard.
I'm going to sneak away to go to another meeting that apparently is time sensitive with a school district, but thank you all.
Goodbye, Ruth. Thank you.
Bye.
I did just put a document in the chat as well, the Early College Plus program and Cybersecurity Fundamentals Certificate Program at CCV. So don't forget about your community college when you're talking about the programs that
You got it. Sorry.
But you can also see, when you look at that flyer, I think it's a really great outline of Early College Plus as well, which I think is a really important piece there. But I think as we're talking about, the number of high school students that attend CCV, and the Fast Forward program, all of the pieces is really huge. And I think we're just seeing a growth there with cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Can I go sideways off the agenda for a second? I feel like there's a pattern emerging. When you go back to number 1 and we talked about the CTE, and I get it, we're focusing on that goals, not like diving in the weeds here, but I just want to make sure that we're making note of some of the conversation that's happening so that when we do start to dive into the how we're going to tackle this, a couple things have just come up in these conversations today. When we talk about CTE programs and identifying new in the first one, does it have to be new, or could they be existing programs that we want to expand?
Yeah,
Right. So
question.
just in looking at the first one, I would almost say like it could be new or existing that we want to expand, because maybe we do want to be the cybersecurity and the pilot, whatever, the pilot or the aviation or the
the
right
aviation.
aviation. I'm also looking at Jill and I'm thinking, is there a healthcare something? And I know over the years, there's been a variety of different attempts between like healthcare organizations and the CTE centers, trying to create the pipeline for clinicians that we need. But I don't want to lose sight of that, because again, we have this very old population here. So if there's a space there, and again, I don't want to try to get into the weeds. I just want to put a pin in that and make sure that we aren't forgetting the existing programs we have, but maybe putting more emphasis on those if they're critical to what Vermont needs.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we need more of everything. There's no clinical area we don't need more of. So yes, I certainly wouldn't want us to lose sight of that. I think that's a really good point. We've definitely seen, some efforts to create career ladders and to try to get people who are currently personal care attendants, which is an unlicensed and considered sort of an unskilled service, although it's a very hard job, into say becoming trained LNAs. And all of those folks need to work. They cannot, I mean, that's really the big barrier. We don't have people in our workforce who can afford to go to school without being paid to go to school or work.
Yes.
They can't, free tuition by itself is not enough. They actually need to be paid to train.
Yep. That makes so much sense.
Yeah. And then we've had some things where we've got like some skilled nursing facilities and some hospitals trying to create their own LNA programs, which is great for larger organizations to try to do that. Does not work for most of my home health agencies, for example. They just don't have the administrative bandwidth to build that stuff. And we really need it to be built more on a state level.
Yeah.
We met with Burlington CEDO on Friday, some of us at the department, and they were talking about a training program they're doing with personal care assistants. 6 weeks or 8 weeks. They're about to start a new cohort. I'm guessing you must know about it.
I don't know about that in particular. Yeah, if you have anything that I can read, I'd love to see it. If there's anything you forward to me, that'd be great.
It was a in a room conversation, but I'll go dig for sure.
Okay.
And send it to you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if you can. Everybody seems to think I know more than I know this week already. It's only Monday at 2:00, and I'm like, I don't know about that either. I don't know. I don't know what I'm missing. I don't know why I'm missing things.
Say the other two goals, which I won't put up and share right now, I thought we were somewhat on the same page, which was, is there a way we can create some kind of subcommittee or effort to, and I have see if we can get 1,000 graduates to stay here. Kendall, you want to jump in?
Sorry, can I just add one last piece to this kind of youth career exposure goal?
Yep.
And I can follow up with people offline so as to not continue to drag us down this rabbit hole. But if our goal is pathways for kids, I also want to think about if we make it a little bit more general to include the work-based learning programs, personalized PLPs, personalized learning pathways, and the after school and summer space. And I can talk with Ruth and others about how to not make it so broad that we don't get anything done, but recognize that CT is only a portion of where that exposure and enrichment happens.
Right. Thanks. And I'll just add that the last goal that I don't think anybody has a problem with is to make the office's webpage, homepage be more useful. I'm not sure we need to go into any detail on that because we'll do that over the course of the years. Yeah, stand stuff up. The inventory and some of the other things that we're doing. So we are near the end of the meeting. Jay, I'm gonna hand it back to you.
No, thank you. I think lastly,
Yeah.
we're just going to talk about September and November dates for the full board meetings. I think we have.
Oh, I have failed to doodle poll. I apologize, Sabina.
It's all right. You're gonna just have to be available the day we pick.
I love how you called yourself out.
Right away. That was quick.
I am nothing if not straightforward about all my failings. As anyone who works with me knows. Also, I would make a request that in our meetings that I not be senator, that if I'm able to call all of you by your first name, Shirley, you can call me Allison. And second, oh, God, I had Sabina, do you have an update on who you're hiring to work with you?
Maybe. I was gonna send a note out to everybody.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I announce it that way so everybody gets the news at the same time? This person is starting on Monday.
Today?
No, I'm sorry, a week from today.
All right.
Well, there's got to be some advantage to showing up at a meeting. Like, don't we get to hear the news first?
Well, okay, we have made an offer and she has accepted to Drake Turner, who will be coming on Monday. And I was going to give you a little bit more about her background and everything, but
Right.
she was with Let's Grow Kids for a while. She was with the Vermont State
terrific.
College. Yes, she is. She's a smart cookie. If that's an okay thing to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We want lots of smart cookies.
Yeah.
And actually, did Tiffany go off speaking of cookies, Tiffany, I am going to be emailing you and Joyce Judy about a new idea I've had. Actually, it's an old idea, but it goes to workforce and it goes to development and it goes to a whole industry in Vermont that we are underserving at the moment.
Fantastic. Can't wait. And I think you should just say you wanted to do a live doodle. Don't say you didn't do a doodle poll. You want to try out live doodling, which is asking us right now when we're available. Live doodling, you can have it.
That's great.
Was a great idea.
But wait a minute, I want to hear what the good idea is for Tiffany and President Judy.
No, you'll have to wait.
Oh,
I'm not going to
Send the
expose
doodle.
myself that fully. You have at least an answer. They may think my idea is such ridiculousness that,
all
you
right,
know,
okay,
but at the next meeting, I promise to share it because
okay.
I
I can
think
be
it's pretty good.
patient.
The suspense is
And
killing
Jay,
me.
I apologize for interrupting.
No, you're fine. That was perfect. I think we have the dates that we're looking at are 9/24 and 11/18, Senator
Sorry.
Clarkson. So I think that's what.
9/24.
Yep, and 11/18 are the dates that we had kind of
Okay,
dialed
I'm
in.
checking my dates.
We were working around weddings and all kinds of stuff, so we were hopeful that would work.
Oh, look, I can't wait to show you the pictures. The 24th. Hey, it looks good.
Excellent.
And November. Oh my God, November is the cruelest month. What did he think by thinking April was? It's got
11
something in green that I can't read that is not me. So either of those dates are great. Both of those dates are great.
Excellent.
So what
Well,
was
Savannah,
on the
you-
one in November was the 18th or the 17th?
I have 18th.
Okay.
And what's the time? Remind me. Is it late afternoon or?
No. Sabina, what do we have for it?
I think we were thinking morning, Jay, right?
Yeah.
Either 9 or 9:30 start.
So I hate to ask, but for our full board, does that make sense in the middle of the workday? I mean,
That's when we've done the, good point.
And those have been
When are
longer
you
though. I
thinking
mean,
about it? When are you thinking?
well, I think that's the question is what are we thinking?
Oh.
I think if we're trying to be business friendly, we would either be at the end of the day or early at the beginning of the day, like 8:30 to 10:30 or 4 to 6 or 5 to 7
Yeah.
or
Well, hold the 2 dates.
Can you
done.
give me the 2 dates again, please?
Yes, September, hang on a second.
24th.
Okay.
September 24th.
And November 18.
Okay.
With the
Siobhan, I
idea,
think I sent, yeah, and I sent you a note, Siobhan. I'll be in Europe from the 10th to
Yes.
the 27th. So
yes. So we'll see you in November.
No, I have been on Zoom meetings in Vermont when I have been out of country. You, Chris, can figure out how to
No.
do this.
No.
No pressure.
No, I'm gonna say no to that, Allison.
Well,
I'm gonna
if
call
it's
you
a holiday.
Allison and I'm gonna say no to that. Work-life balance. But I missed the entire conversation about dates because my Teams just totally went out on my computer for the second time today. So if someone could just say them again, if you need me to
Looking
weigh in.
at a September meeting on the 24th and a November meeting on the 18th. And Jay and I were originally thinking morning, but there was some conversation about maybe end of day, but
The September one's fine, and say again when the November one was.
18th.
It's gonna be cold and dark, you guys.
We will light each other's lives.
Dark
May as
right
well
now,
meet.
believe it or not, in the morning.
I don't have any issues with either of those. I'm pretty flexible
Okay.
both of those dates. For what it's worth.
Maybe if we don't do 9 to noon, we'll do, like you said, 8:30 to 10:30 kind of thing. Yeah. But I'll ask the chair to help me figure that out if he doesn't mind.
That's fine. All right. Oh, and Sabana, you're working on a location for in-person as well, right?
That would be more centrally located for some folks. Yeah.
As well as virtual. Okay.
And easy virtual. Well, we can always offer the State House.
There were a couple of folks who brought up that was a little bit far north for them.
Oh. Huh. Maybe CCV could host us, Tiffany.
Yeah, I was just thinking, it's so funny because when I think people think Rutland is the South, and I know Rutland is the north of the South at best. So Rutland or any of I would be happy to chat with you about that.
Yeah, or White River. Or White River.
White River.
But
VTSU Randolph may be more palatable for people as opposed to Montpelier.
Yeah, I was thinking Middlebury area kind of is most central, east, west, north, south, but that's as far as I went in my brain.
Yeah, if there's a business that has a great conference room with Zoom with big screen, that would be great.
CCV Middlebury is at the Vermont Community Foundation now, and they have a really beautiful conference room. It does have to be reserved. So
would you like to see if they're available September 24th?
I can ask about that. Parking is a little odd because it's next to Shaw's, as you may know. It's right in the top of the circle there, and Shaw's has a sign every about 3 inches telling you better not park here. We're going to tell you. So I would just be more concerned in Middlebury about parking and the ease when it comes to, and east-west is not easy for Middlebury, by the way. North-south is, but east-west is not.
Middlebury
I was like, Martha, how do you feel about Middlebury?
Yeah, Middlebury east-west is not easy.
Because you got the gap. Good point. Good point.
Yeah, it's all gap driving. I mean, in November, it could be, well, September, hopefully there won't be snow, but in November it could be. But it's
No,
not super
September, you've got
easy.
peepers. In
Yeah.
September, you've got the peepers. They're as,
Yeah.
they're as brutal as the snow.
Driving through Woodstock in September.
I'm not, you notice I am not offering Woodstock. Anyway, you'll figure out a great place.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
we'll
let me
keep
know,
talking.
Sabina, CCV,
Thank
any
you.
of our locations is helpful.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
all.
So I don't think there's no further topics. Anything else anyone wants to bring up on any of the topics we discussed? If not, then we can get a motion to adjourn.
I would move that we adjourn
Second
Give you a
motion.
second. All right, thank you.
forthwith.
Excellent. All right. Thank you,
Good to see
everybody.
you all. Happy
Thank
more
you.
summer.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.